What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmaker's Corner. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V. It is episode 512, recorded on April 15th, 2026 here. We got your rankings and recognitions episode, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna go ahead and apologize ahead of time. I am working through it. I am going through it. So if I sound a little bit sick, I apologize. I'm going to try to keep it a shorter episode on this one. But, we got a lot of great players and programs to recognize here after week 9 of the 2026 Women's College Flag Football season. So we're not going to delay. Let's just go ahead and hop right into it. Starting with Playmaker of the Week here. Really, we were looking at players from 3 different games. Kaiser versus Warner, Weber versus St. Thomas, and then Ottawa versus Kansas Wesleyan here. Riley Bolster was a popular pick for the Weber versus St. Thomas one, obviously on Ottawa. You had a couple players there that were in consideration, and then even in this Warner versus Kaiser game, there were a couple players that were in there for consideration. But at the end of the day, we went ahead and decided that your Week 9 Playmaker of the Week has to be Omariah Gordon of Warner. In that game, she made some key plays, especially, there are key plays in the fourth quarter that really helped Warner seal this one and get their first ever Sun Conference title, regular season Sun Conference title, which is absolutely massive here. And so here was the stat line for OMG Omariah Gordon. 1 rush for 13 yards and a touchdown. That would end up being the touchdown that would seal the game. Also, 6 receptions for 40 receiving yards. Did make a sick one-handed catch, but unfortunately not counted as a touchdown there. And then I think most importantly, got a big-time interception late in the fourth quarter to go ahead and delay Kaiser from potentially, I think they could have potentially tie the game. And this was just an amazing interception made by Omariah Gordon here, and then would get paid off with that rushing touchdown in the end. And so, like I said, so many players to consider, but, when it comes down to it and we're splitting hairs, these plays that go down in the fourth quarter do matter, especially when a conference title is on the line. So, there you go there. That is your Week 9 Playmaker of the Week. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about our PMC rankings here. These are, the rankings that we will release after week 9, which is all the games up into April 12th. These will be the last rankings that we will release until the very end of the season. So we're going to let the entire postseason go by. Sun Conference Tournament, KCAC Tournament, Conference Carolinas, D1, D2 JUCO, the Invitational, and then we will release a final end of season rankings, 2026 end of season rankings after all of that goes down. And so this will be our last rankings until then. In case you don't know, myself and the other rankers, we rank teams 1 through 25. If any team is ranked by us, at number 1, they get 25 points, 2, 24, and so on and so on. I then add up the points, and then the team with the most points are closer to the top here. And so, as I go through, I will also be listing off the reasons that some of our rankers have teams ranked where they are. Just remember, some of these rankers rank teams differently from obviously what our final PMC rank is. So just keep that in mind. Now, I'm not going to say last week's rankings. You can go ahead and check that out on all of our social medias at Playmaker's Corner, as well as womenscollegeflagfootball.com. But let's just go ahead and get right into it. Like I said, trying to power through here. Let's start with the teams that are getting ranked here, but we're just outside our top 25, starting with Campbellsville. This is what Cody had to say about them. He said only 1 game left for a final attempt for a meaningful win. Rest against Milligan this Saturday, and I gotta agree with that. Campbellsville, kind of an up and down year here with a new head coach. I believe they will probably finish just about where they were last season. I know they went through some injuries, so there was that, unfortunately, but altogether still a winning record. We'll see how Saturday goes, though. Moving on, we have Villa Maria, who I don't think I included last week, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and include this week. Women's college flag football had this to say: this team just getting better and better, but big W's in the NCAA tournament. This team was no slouch for 2 years before this season. Agreed there. Moving on, we have Midland here. Cody says this: in a mild scare, they squeaked by Southwestern, but then pitched back-to-back shutouts to get through the weekend. They did get upset on Sunday, which is alarming, but also par for the course. I'm just going to be honest. I don't think they played all their starters. I didn't see a lot of Wolf in there in that upset, so I don't know. I made sure to cover that one there. But Midland just outside our top 25. Right here is Eastern, or up next is Eastern. Women's college flag football says, was the loss to Montclair more about Montclair State or Eastern? We think Montclair has passed the eye test. Eastern is a solid squad there. Moving on, Ventura is just outside as well. Women's college flag football said Ventura is peaking at the right time, while other Cali JUCOs devour themselves. Agreed there. They are kind of separating themselves for sure. And then the last team that is just out is D3 Montclair State. Women's college flag football said bound to cause some controversy, but double check the schedule. Only loss came to Eastern in OT, then avenged that loss for a big W later in the season, crushing lesser teams. And agreed there. They have had a couple nice wins so far, but for now are just outside our top 25. Now at 25 is Marymount, who moves up a spot from being unranked last week here. Cody says 4-0 week over the weekend for a surge. Women's college flag football says racking up W's. This team is living up to preseason expectations. Why are Southeastern teams that win year over year are called dynasties, but not Northern ones? Good question. All right, and then moving on to 24, we have Gallaudet, who does move up 3 spots here. Cody says they continue to show their skill and press as they handle their schedule and battle Ferrum closer than the Bobcats below. And then Women's College Flag Football says close loss to Ferrum and dominant in other wins. Are the Bisons underrated? They are definitely underrated, but I would love to see them play tougher teams for sure. They play who they play, and they are undefeated, though, and that does mean something. We'll see how some of these conference championships go, though. Now, tied at 21, we have 3 teams tied at 21 here. Roberts Wesleyan, Huntington, and Lise McRae. Let's start with Lise McRae, who's at 21. They actually moved down 2 spots here. This is what Women's College Flag Football says: when you schedule this tough, it should be rewarded. Watch them win the Conference Carolina tournament just to make life interesting. And I don't think that is that crazy, actually. I think there are 4 teams here, which we'll all be talking about, that really will be competing for that Conference Carolinas. And Lise McRae, I feel like, has the most experience right now. Cody says, not how you want to finish the regular season with Ferrum, but they're just as capable of going on a run and winning this Conference Carolinas tourney with defense and if they get mistake-free offense. Agreed there. Offensively, I think there are times where, they are boom or bust, but there are a couple times, too many, where they make a couple just very easy mistakes, and you can't be shooting yourselves in the foot this late in the season and expect to continuously win. So we will see what happens, but don't get it twisted. Lise McRae is probably better than this 21st spot here, or at least tied at 21 spot here. Moving on, let's talk about Huntington, who actually slides a spot here. Cody says this: tough 1-point loss to Milligan, but a true testament to the grit of this team and the capabilities of this squad. Women's college flag football says when your 3 losses come as 2 losses to Milligan and a loss to Campbellsville, and it is offset with 14 wins, that is a great season. Agreed there. It is also worth pointing out Huntington did not have their starting quarterback, Kennedy Young, for like 2 or 3 drives against Milligan. They had to roll out to Maya Carter, who's not bad. She's a great athlete, right? But I'm just saying Kennedy Young will come in later on in the drive or later on in the game. I think this is probably a different game if she got to play the entire time. Now, our last team, tied at 21, is Roberts Wesleyan. Women's college flag football says this team has passed every test. 2 games later this season with Villa will be big. Seems to be the team in the Northeast. And I agree, at least one of the teams in the Northeast. Unfortunately, just kind of a short schedule, but I get it for a first-year program. Not bad at all. Now at 20 is Aurora, who slides down a couple of spots. Women's college flag football says this team has passed every test. Siena Heights and St. Francis games will be big. Seems to be the team in the Midwest. We will see. I think Siena Heights and St. Francis will both push Aurora here in a way that they haven't been pushed before. So we'll see how that goes. They really move down because other teams move up here. Now, 19 is Daytona State, who moves up 4 spots here. Let's start with women's college flag football. They said, I understand losing to Florida Gateway and UCF. Other teams have fewer losses and more better wins. Wallace is playing teams this spring. Agreed. Cody says, took other programs out as an opportunity to swing this team back into the tier I really think they belong in. Don't sleep on Daytona State just yet here. I think this postseason could get a little interesting. At 18 is Thomas. Women's college flag football says uninspiring season for the Nighthawks. Enough high-profile wins to be ranked highly enough head-scratching losses to throw them out. Cody says 2 massive wins to remind everyone they're not the bottom of the conference, and the rest will be huge for the squad to have a chance to rest their stars and make a push for nationals. I mean, you can't, at this point, if you're Thomas, you can't rest anybody. You have to win as many games as possible, especially in the Sun Conference tournament here. I believe, and it doesn't start until next week, so we'll cover that in more detail next week, but I believe they play Life. That's a must-win there. And then I want to say the winner plays Kaiser. If you could get an upset over Kaiser, that will punch your ticket to the national championship, but anything less, the NAIA Invitational, but anything less, I don't know if they get that invite. Now at 17 is Barton College, who moves down a couple spots. Cody says they picked up a win. Women's college flag football says took a decent enough UMO team to the woodshed after that Lise McRae loss. It's fine, but with other teams moving up, they do slide just a little bit. At 16 is Lindsey Wilson, who moves down 2 spots here. Cody says, nice win, but for this squad to have a chance to make an invite, they'll have to win out with big games at Emmanuel and Milligan remaining this week. Women's college flag football says this team has a lot of convincing wins to boast and could push some top teams. Only losses are to Ferrum and Life, could use a splash W, and I agree. I don't know how heavy the selection committee is weighing these non-NAIA games. Probably not super heavy, but a win over Milligan would not guarantee you a spot in the Invitational, but put you in a really good spot to make it. Now at 15 is Life, who stays here, same as last time. Cody says took care of business. Women's college flag football says if there's a true dark horse in the Sun Conference tournament, it is Life U running Eagles, having the receipts and fly under the radar. Yeah, agreed there. I think this is a Life team that's very talented when healthy. I will say they probably lucked out just a little bit getting Thomas here rather than a St. Thomas who has a million skill players or a Weber who is very stacked as well. I think against a team like Thomas, you could potentially beat them, but we'll see what happens here. And then after that, obviously, you have Kaiser. At 14 is Wingate, who slides a spot here. Women's college flag football says time to remember that this team looked good in scrimmage. Lost to Ottawa in early season. Win over Ferrum is marquee win. Solid team, talented. Cody says sealed the number 1 seed in the Conference Carolinas tournament, so I was tempted to put them higher, but I'm still worried about them rolling all the way through. I kind of agree there. But you have what you have. Janelle Francis or Haley Bowie, it looks like they are rolling with Francis, I believe. So, and that's not a bad option. She's had a couple games to settle down, so you know what she can and can't do. It gets real in the postseason. We'll see how all that comes to fruition this weekend, though. It all goes down this weekend. All right, moving on. At 13 is St. Thomas, who actually moves down a couple spots here. Women's college flag football says St. Thomas shows how the sun giveth and taketh away. Losing to Weber is not a bad loss and have enough good wins to offset losses. For now, I will say. It doesn't tank their chances at an invitational, but it obviously doesn't help him either. Cody says brutal loss at an inopportune time for a team that was shown as further than most thought for the NAIA invite. Fortunately for them, the Sun Conference tournament lays ahead. And yeah, I mean, STU, I think they got to beat somebody in the first round at the very least. And then obviously more is more here. If they beat Weber, who they have, they avenge their loss, and then a win over a Kaiser Warder would obviously mean a whole bunch there. But I would say that would probably make, and we'll talk about it more in detail, but that probably makes that Weber playoff game or postseason game much more of a must win. Speaking of, Weber's right here ahead of St. Thomas at 12, up 6 spots. Cody says the Warriors struggled and battled for a much-needed win in double overtime that at best could help with seeding in the Sun, but they'll have to face Thomas or St. Thomas in the Sun Conference tournament, and that will have to happen with more consistency. I don't know what Cody means by that, but there you go. Women's college flag football says just what it looked like. The Warriors were in zombie mode. They came to life with a big win over St. Thomas. Agreed there. This was much needed. Showed a lot of heart in that game. I believe their final home game with just a very talented crew, their senior class crew. And you know, they needed this one, they got it. Now, if they lose to St. Thomas, that becomes a harder argument, obviously, to make the Invitational. But even if they play them close, I think they're in a great spot right now. Every win does matter for Weber, though, moving forward, just to be sure. Now, at 11 is Farab, who stays right here. Women's college flag football says this is among the better squads in the country. That said, the Conference Carolinas tournament is a gauntlet with no absolute favorites. 100% agreed there. Cody said never a bad week when you hang 100, LMAO. Yeah, there's that as well. Like I said, Farron, Barden, Wingate, Lisa McRae, you could probably honestly throw a manual in there as well. It's really probably going to be a race between those 5 teams here. Those teams have all played each other close on different days, so we'll see what these days coming up here look like. Now at 10 is Hope, who stays right here. Let's start with Gino. Gino says, GSAC regular season champs. No one in the GSAC is even coming close to touching them this year. Hopefully they play Nevada State next year so that we can see really who is the top team in the West. And Gino obviously wrote that before it was official. Nevada State is officially joining the NAIA as well as the GSAC, so that could be a very fun rivalry to look forward to every single year. Women's college flag football said this about Hope. Assuming they cruise through the GSAC tournament, though I think ACU could do it, can they outpace a team that is a tier better than St. Thomas/Weber? I don't know, but I think that is a good question to bring up here. Can they do it? Can they even beat a Weber or St. Thomas again? I know it's been a little bit. We'll see what happens here, but first they got to take care of business in the GSAC. Cody says undefeated in the OUAZ championship and now face Simpson on Thursday for the GSAC chip and bid to nationals. So there you go. At number 9 is St. Francis, who did not play this week, but they do move up 3 spots with other teams losing. Gino says the independent tournament is going to be a blast, and I agree. And then women's college flag football says, wish we got to see them more. The Cougars made a lot of noise this season with a challenging schedule, and I agree. You know, I think I had their schedule split, maybe with even more losses than wins here, and they came out with more wins and had some tough games where they barely lost, and you really got to respect that. This independent tournament is going to be interesting, though. I think this is where you go ahead and punch your ticket and not leave it up to the selection committee. Now at 8 is Nevada State here. Let's start with Cody, because they do move down a spot here. Cody said this, bumping the squad back to make room in conversation for teams competing for spots at nationals and finals. maybe not fair, but just the fate of this first year program. Look toward a more insightful ranking once we do preseason next year for when they're hopefully in a conference. Gino says the West just got stronger with Nevada State joining the NAIA for next season. That's going to be fun to watch without a doubt. And then Women's College Flag Football said Nevada State moving to the NAIA sets up some big games next season from a fan's perspective. Fingers crossed for affiliate GSAC membership. And yes, like I said, as of right now, today, the 15th, they are officially a part of the GSAC, and so that's going to be really, really fun to watch. Can't express that enough. Now, moving on here, we have a tie at 6th place, Baker and Kansas Wesleyan. K-Dub stays here, Baker moves up. Let's start with Kansas Wesleyan. Women's College Flag Football said this: split with Ottawa and a loss to Baker. This team is crushing lesser teams. Would have been great to have some non-conference games. Agreed there. Gino says they were playing catch-up for most of that game against Ottawa, but they still fought really hard. KWU can legit beat anybody this year if their offense is rolling like it was in that first Ottawa game. And then Cody says it was too little, too late for the Yotes, but still a quality contest, and they really have a chance to still compete for the KCAC crown under the right conditions. And I agree there. I think, there are other years where there were bigger questions about Kansas Wesleyan. This year, I think that margin has definitely slimmed quite a bit here. I think they are much closer to Baker and Ottawa than some people may think, and it showed in all the games they played against Ottawa, but also you have the other part of it where they got blown out by Baker as well, I'm pretty sure, and that's never a good look. And so we will see who shows up for this KCAC tournament and really plays their heart out here, but, I believe this is Shahira Wada's last year, and she's always played pretty good, so we'll see if they can make the most of her final season on the college level. Now, tied with them is Baker, a team that Kansas Wesleyan is almost for sure going to have to go through, but Women's College Flag Football says the loss to Midland is overblown. That said, their schedule is better than others of the KCAC for traveling to Arizona, and they crushed solid KWU team. We'll talk about that in a minute. Gino says Baker can legit hold their own against any team, but I can't imagine going super far with how this offense is playing right now. There is a serious lack of consistency and efficiency right now, and that concerns me ahead of the KCAC tournament and to the national tournament. Cody says the win against Midland still stings, but they shrugged that off for a win this past week, and they'll need a good KCAC showing to aim for the invite. Look, they still lost badly to Midland. That I don't know if overblown is the right thing to say right there, but when you have everyone playing against everyone on Midland's team and you still lose that way, and it wasn't score-wise bad, but just super sloppy, you can't ignore that. I said this last week. Baker could do one of two things. They could sweep it under the rug and continue to do what they do, and maybe it happens again, or they take it seriously and look it straight in the eye and use this as the turning point in their season. It's never too late to have a turning point. You'd rather have it near the end of this season where everything's clicking and you're doing everything you got to do. Not every game is going to look good, but you have to find ways to win. That's expected out of a contender. And right now, Baker, look, yeah, they beat some teams in Arizona, but I don't know if any of those teams are going to make the Invitational. If I was on the selection committee and Baker does not make the conference championship, depending on how it all goes down, there could definitely be arguments for Weber and St. Thomas ahead of them. I would not be surprised about that. And so for Baker, you got to lock it in. Finish out the games this week, dominate, get your groove back on, and then it goes down for real in the KCAC tournament, because I legitimately think they could win it all if they lock it in, if they played their best football, right? And they find ways to win tough games. That's just what it's going to come down to. Got to find ways to win tough games. So we'll see what happens. But right now, they are at a little bit of a crossroads here. The win this last week is not a bad start, though. At 5 is Kaiser, who does move down 2 spots here. Let's start with women's college flag football. Would be high entertainment value if losses to Ottawa and Warner are used as fuel and Kaiser goes off on everyone to end the season. Also would not surprise me. Agreed there. Gino says dropping 3 spots may seem harsh, but there is simply a difference between a team like Warner and a team like Kaiser. Kaiser has blown 2 2-score leads to top opponents this year. This seemed like the perfect year for them to get over the hump, but it's getting harder and harder to imagine that happening this season. Cody says this: after going into half with a lead, the Warner defense turned up the heat and shut out Kaiser the second half. The Seahawks showed that they could win against Warner, but will need a whole game of effort to do so. I mean, you got to find ways to win tough games. Like I said about Baker and K-Dub and all those other teams, you got to find ways to win tough games. You put yourself in this position. You've won enough games. You are playing top-tier opponents. It is not enough to just look good for one half. It's not. It is enough to find a way to go ahead and get it done. And unfortunately for them, they just did not play a good second half. And I think there's a good chance that they avenge that in the Sun Conference tournament. But then after that, you still got the Nationals tournament as well, the Invitational, right? Which will be double elimination. So you can afford a loss, but that just does not mean getting comfortable with that, though. There's no way you could win a national championship being comfortable knowing that you could lose once, right? You got to be on your toes. And so this Sun Conference tournament will be interesting. We'll see where they really are at. And then that's as good as it gets before we get to the real thing. Now, interesting enough here, tied at 3 is Ottawa and Milligan. Both teams moving up a couple of spots. Ottawa 2 spots, Milligan 1. Let's start with Cody. Talking about Milligan, Cody says, phew, their undefeated season was really on the line against Huntington, but they hung in there. If they win against Emmanuel and Campbellsville, they should all but solidify their spot at Nationals. They still have that independent tournament, though, so we'll see. Gino says, the independent tournament is going to be the toughest set of games Milligan has played so far this season. I'm very interested to see what happens after that game against Huntington. And then Women's College Flag Football says, if I'm the Buffs, I'm going on straight-up disrespect tour into tournament play. They play anyone and win. I think their schedule was harder than Warner's. I just think Warner's would win head-to-head. I am not going to get into that right now, but I respectfully disagree. I think, and I looked at both of the schedules for sure. I could see why, he would say that. But I like the consistency of Kaiser, Weber, St. Thomas a lot more, right, than some of the other teams that Milligan played here. So that's just me, though. That's just me. But I want to make sure I give my due to the Florida teams because I know they've been doing it for a while, and it's good football. There's a reason other teams struggle when they go there, mostly. So there you go. But let's move on. The other team tied with them is Ottawa, who had a big weekend. Let's start with women's college flag football. Secured home field advantage for the KCAC tournament. Looks more the favorite now than in the preseason. And I don't argue with that at all. Gino says split the season series against Kansas Wesleyan to stay in the top 4. And then Cody says massive win in their get back that will ensure a top seed in the KCAC tournament. I will say this about Ottawa. You can never doubt them. Until they are eliminated for sure the postseason, they're not gone. Especially in this last year with the Sours here, they're gonna make something happen, and so we'll see about Ottawa, but they're not going away. Now, 2 is Florida Gateway, who stays right here. Women's College Flag Football says watch them on tape and tell me they don't deserve to be here. Coaching at this program is elite. Agreed. Gino says now firmly number 2 in the nation after Kaiser lost to Warner. And then Cody says won in dominant fashion over Point. Agreed. Now at number 1 is Warner. Let's go ahead and start with Women's College Flag Football. Anything other than a Sun Conference tournament and Red Banner from the NAIA will be a letdown. Gino says simply the best team in the country, and there's no denying that. And then Cody says things might have looked dicey by the end of the first half against Kaiser, but this Warder team continued to remind everyone this is not the same Warder team from the past, as they rallied and leaned on the defense to playmake, and the offense would finish. Fantastic performance that more than any win prior seals a spot in the NAIA Invitational. And yeah, I gotta agree, even if they lost the Sun Conference, which I don't think they will, I think they're guaranteed a spot at the NAIA Invitational and are probably the favorites. Even right now, are probably still the favorites. We've been saying it since the season has started, and since they've played, their offense looks super complete. Their defense legitimately looked like one of the best ones in the entire country here. The way they were able to turn on the switch and lock it in against one of the most, just talented and deepest offenses in the country, that is definitely saying something. Right, that is a killer instinct that you look for in national champions. Now, here's the thing. You do have your Sun Conference regular season title, which is nice, right? But at this point, I do think women's college flag football has a point. Anything less than a Sun Conference championship and a Red Banner would be a letdown. That comes with being undefeated, right? There's pressure that comes with that. Some of them, I'm sure, embraces it. Some of them don't care about it. Don't care about what media has to say, and that is totally fine. But at the end of the day, I think the big narrative for Warner at this point in the season, undefeated, Sun Conference champions of one of the toughest women's college flag football conferences, if not the toughest one in the country. I think it definitely bears the narrative. Can they get it done? At this point, that is all that matters. You already know that they're going to get a bunch of awards. Right? If you checked out our finalists, those haven't dropped yet. If you checked out our mid-season candidates, and then eventually our finalists here in a couple weeks, you will see that it reflects how good of a team that we feel Warner is. So, just pulling that out there. But massive win against Kaiser. I'm not going to lie, I was a little worried at half, but then they pulled through. And that's a signature win for Coach Mims. That's a signature win for the program and all those players. Just massive win, and so congrats to them over there. And so there you go. That is our last PMC Women's College Flag Football rankings for the regular season, at least this year. We will do a rankings after all the tournaments are done. National, NAIA, D3, D2, JUCOs. We'll talk about it all then after that. So, there you go. Once more, just outside, Campbellsville, Villa Maria, Midland, Eastern, Ventura, Montclair State. At 25 is Marymount, 24 is Gallaudet. Tied at 21 is Lisa McRae, Huntington, and Roberts Wesleyan. 20 is Aurora, 19 is Daytona State, 18 is Thomas, 17 is Barnard College, 16 is Lindsey Wilson, 15 is Life, 14 is Wingate, 13 is St. Thomas, 12 is Weber, 11 is Ferrum, 10 is Hope, 9 is St. Francis, 8 is Nevada State. Tied at 6 is Baker and Kansas Wesleyan. 5 is Kaiser. Tied at 3 is Milligan and Ottawa. 2 Florida Gateway. And at number 1 still is Warner. All right, now Cody is going to do the Conference Carolinas tournament preview after this segment, but real quick, wanted to talk about the NAIA Invitational Outlook. Remember, only 8 teams can make it in. The selection committee will pick those 8 teams, and they will compete for a national championship. Now, the last time I did this segment here, literally the day that we released this episode, the NAIA released, their first rankings here. And the regular season rankings is actually posted by the NAIA Women's Flag Football National Selection Committee, a panel of administrators from NAIA campuses and conferences participating in NAIA Women's Flag Football. Like I said, me and everyone here are not on the selection committee, and we also don't exactly know where the reasonings lie, but we do our best to predict and try to see where they're coming from. And so This was posted on April 9th here, so I'm just gonna list off all the teams that were in the top 10 here. At 10 was St. Francis. Tied at 8 was Baker and St. Thomas. 7 Milligan, 6 Weber, 5 Hope International, 4 Kansas Wesleyan, 3 Kaiser, 2 Ottawa, and at number 1 was Warner. Now, other teams receiving votes here was Lindsey Wilson, Midland, and Life. So that should kind of give you a picture of who's all in consideration. Now, with the games that happened last week, this is where things get interesting. So, right away, Warner, I said this. If they secure the Sun Conference regular season championship title, I think they'd be in a great spot. They would, and I don't know if I said this on last week's episode, but that would essentially pretty much lock up an invitational invite if it hasn't already been locked up. And so they went ahead, they beat Kaiser, undisputed number 1 team. They could literally lose in the conference championship, and I still think they will get an invite. So consider them locked in my opinion. Now at 2, this team was ranked at 2 in the rankings that came out April 9th was Ottawa. And even when they lost to Kaiser, right, they were ranked at 2 ahead of them. So, which I think is interesting and further reinforces, what I was saying last week here. But they go ahead and get a big win over Kansas Wesleyan, a close one, but another win over Kansas Wesleyan is not bad at all. They now become the regular season champs. And so now I think no matter what, they are pretty much locked in at that invitational spot there. There's no way that they don't include Warner or Ottawa in the Invitational. So there you go. And like I said, it's not official. This is just me predicting things. I think they take up 2 of the 8 spots available. So there you go. Now, I don't know. This may seem a little controversial, but I also think that Kaiser is probably safe as well. And here's my thinking, right? Outside of a relatively close loss to Warner and Ottawa, the top 2 teams in the country, they are undefeated. They beat Weber. They beat St. Thomas. I think they also beat St. Francis. Didn't they play St. Francis? Let me look that up real quick here. I'm pretty sure they beat St. Francis. Yes, they did. They beat them 35-12 here, which should be saying something. I think Kaiser's resume looks really good. Now, I think if they were to lose to a team that is already ranked here, like a Weber, St. Thomas, Warner, whatever, maybe they drop out. I really realistically they would have to lose to like a team like Life, who's getting a vote, but like is definitely last in these rankings so far here, and so I would just go ahead and say that Kaiser is most likely safe. We'll say 80% safe they will make the Invitational. Now, this is where things get complicated, right? Let's look at the other teams that are just outside here in those rankings that were dropped. Just outside the top 3. Let's look at Kansas Wesleyan. They fought Ottawa. Unfortunately, they just fell in a close one to Ottawa. I think if they beat them, that probably guarantees them a spot in. I just have a hard time seeing the NAIA denying a regular season champion a spot in. But unfortunately, they lose. This week, they get Graceland, Connie, William Woods. I mean, you obviously can't afford to lose any of those if you are Kansas Wesleyan. But maybe the biggest blemish is a 6-31 loss to Baker. If anything is going to hold you out of the Invitational, that might be it. Even though they beat Ottawa by 1, Ottawa definitely came back and also beat them, showing how close that matchup could be. That 6-31 loss to Baker, who is currently tied at 8, I don't know if that's necessarily going to go away, so we'll see. Now at 5 is Hope. They are the GSAC regular season champions. I have a really hard time seeing them not make it. I definitely think they should. So, I don't want to say they're locked in, but, I mean, I'm going to say they're probably a 90% lock at this point here. So that probably puts 4 teams, half the teams, in the NAIA who have a really good shot at the Invitational right now. And actually, let's just go ahead and add another one here. Let's add Milligan. I'm going to skip Weber. We'll talk about them in a minute. But Milligan is currently at 7. And they're undefeated too. You got to keep that in mind. But I will say this. Milligan does have some teams that they are going to play this week here. Emmanuel is obviously no slouch of a team. That is a very good team from Georgia, right? I think at the time I'm recording this, they're currently playing right now. Most importantly, though, Campbellsville, that is going to be a game that you could have some pretty big implications. A upset right there is definitely not what you need. So we'll see what happens, right? But Milligan is probably 70% of the way there. They have this independent tournament where they're going to play a bunch of other teams that don't have a conference, have to win out to guarantee you a spot. Now, then you have a bunch of teams that are just outside here looking to make their way in. Let's talk about Weber, Baker, St. Thomas. Weber gets a big win over St. Thomas, so that at least puts them over them for now. And that probably makes the resume look pretty good at this point. But if you're looking at Hope's schedule and Weber's schedule, and their schedule is centered around the strength of the St. Thomas team, it also makes it hard to see St. Thomas not making it at this point. Just putting that out there logically. So we'll see what happens. I think both Weber and St. Thomas need to win at least one game in the Sun Conference tournament to make their chances better. And then a loss will definitely make it worse, but we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be really close there. And then you got Baker. This is a team that, I said it in the rankings episode, they got to figure it out. They got to wake up. Obviously, how they prepared for Midland was not good at all, and that cannot happen again. If it happens again, your season's over. That's what it is. And so for Baker, you gotta go out here and you gotta give your best shot. I think realistically, they could win the KCAC. I don't think it's crazy to say that it is a 3-team race between Ottawa, Kansas Wesleyan, and Baker, and it's going to come down to one or two of those teams directly beating the other one to get to where they want to be. And so let's just say Baker beats in Ottawa or even gets to a conference championship and faces off with Kansas Wesleyan. I think there's no way they don't include all 3 of those teams. Now, if they make it there against Ottawa, I think there's a good chance that they take him. Assuming that they beat Kansas Wesleyan before. If not, that definitely makes things dicey, so we'll see. But Baker, they need to have a good conference tournament here to solidify themselves. Now at 10 is St. Francis. They are going to get a direct shot at getting an auto bid here, but they will probably most likely have to beat Milligan. If they cannot beat Milligan, we'll see. Right, we'll see, but obviously not a bad year for a first-year program. Then you have other teams like Lindsey Wilson, Midland, and Life. These are all teams that need to continue to play well. It's probably considered a long shot they make the Invitational, but if they make it far enough in the conference tournament, win the right games, it's not impossible at all. And so we will see what happens at this NAIA Invitational. Very interesting that they released those rankings last week here, but it does give us a better idea of where the selection committee is coming from. But, right now, spots are pretty limited. Half the spots are taken up by, regular season champs, and then you have a spot or two going to some very talented squads. And so we will see what happens here at the end of this week and next week.
Hello, y'all. I am so excited to talk about the inaugural Conference Carolinas Women's Flag Football Championships here. It is going to be a crazy set of games as we've had some instant classics in this division here. Now, there are 8 squads competing in this, despite the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 total teams here in the division. Mars Hill finishing the season 0-13, 0-10 in conference, not qualifying, and they also forfeit their last few games, so I just don't know if they had the numbers or the health to compete. And then Chowan went 1-12 overall, which was not enough. And so sneaking in at the number 8 seed was the Mount here. Now they went 2-8 in their conference action here, picking up wins, I want to say, over Chowan, 47-32. And they also, I want to say, got a forfeit win. I'm pretty sure. No. They defeated Mars Hills 51-13, but lost to a lot of other teams. Now, as far as other wins on the season, they beat Mercy, they beat Keene, they beat Penn State Schuylkill here, and they had a couple of other closer games against some other teams across the way. They picked up a win against St. Joseph's as well as Sacred Heart and played a decent game against Marymount here. But they will be the 8th seed, and they will take on the number 1 seed, Wingate here, who went 8-1, got some tiebreakers to fall their way here for this number 1 seed in the conference here. Their only loss being to Barton here, but Barton with 2 losses in the conference was not eligible for that number 1 seed, and they had the head-to-head against Ferrum in a 28-12 win back on March 24th. So they have the 1 seed and will play Mount St. Mary's on April 17th. Now that's where all of these games take place, and as I said, Ferrum here was the number 2 seed. They only had 1 loss in the conference. That was to Wingate, but overall beat everybody else in the conference, including Barton, giving them another loss. They beat Lise McRae in a huge win to help secure their number 2 seed. As far as other notable games they have, they beat Gallaudet 13-12 here. They lost to Milligan 14-26 and 7-48. That first one being kind of a big deal here. They beat Barton in an absolute thriller, 37-33, I should mention here, and then kept it rolling against the rest of the conference. They beat Emmanuel 14-0. They beat King 58-24 and took care of business against a bunch of other teams here to help finish out this regular season. Now, them as the 2 seed will face the Mount Olive team here, not to be confused with the Mount. Mount Olive here went 3-6 in conference overall, 7-7 in recorded games. They were able to beat North Carolina Central in one of their wins, Mars Hill 26-18, Chowan 42-6, Mount St. Mary's 13-7, which is obviously pretty important for that head-to-head and getting that 7 seed here. They also beat Hollins a couple times for their 7 seed spot against Ferrum. Now, on the same side of the bracket, sticking with it, we got Lise McRae here, who scoops up the number 3 seed here at 7-2 in the conference, 10-7 overall. Kind of crazy because when you look at the standings, it kind of looks like they are the 4 seed here, but they took the head-to-head over Barton College here, and hence the reason that they are going to be the 3 seed and host the number 6 seed, which is King here. King went 4-5 in the conference, beating everyone below them and not playing super hot against the teams above them, really. Now, you look at their win over Mount St. Mary's was dominant, 35-6. They beat Mount Olive 34-25, which is technically a 2-score win here, but unfortunately was not able to hang in prior matchups against the likes of Barton, Lise McRae, Wingate, or even Emmanuel. So we'll see which version of King we will get in that bracket here. Meanwhile, Lise McRae, as I said, they did beat Barton 43-33 in a crazy thriller before losing to Ferrum 33-38. Almost was able to secure the number 2 seed in this tournament, but they still have a lot of notable games here. They tested themselves super early against the likes of Kaiser, Daytona State, and Thomas. They played Florida Gateway super close, 6-13, before defeating Chowan and Emmanuel. They lost a heartbreaker to Wingate here, which, isn't the worst thing, 19-30. And then they lost a very, very brutal close game, 12-13 to Milligan. But this team, when they're firing on all cylinders, is a team that can keep up with anybody and is definitely a threat to still win the Conference Carolinas here at the 3 seed. Flipping over to the other side of the bracket, we have Barton and Emmanuel here. Both these teams posted winning records here, but Emmanuel went 5-4. Meanwhile, Barton went 7-2, as previously mentioned, losing the head-to-head to Lise McRae, but also getting a win over Wingate. When they're at their best, they are one of the most dangerous offenses in the entire country here. but we will see once again which version we get of these squads here. Now, that was a lot of talking about kind of their records and how they ended up where they ended up here. Now let's talk about the layout of the game here. Now, this is going to be hosted at Durham County Memorial Stadium over these couple of days here. And so on April 17th, we're going to have Wingate versus Mount St. Mary's at noon. I'm assuming this is Eastern time, so probably 10 a.m. over here in the Mountain Time Zone if you're trying to tune into those games. Then it's Barton versus Emmanuel at 2:15 p.m. Eastern time. So that side of the bracket will be decided before the afternoon gets too heavy. But as we go into the evening, we got Lisa McRae and King at 4:45 and Ferrum versus Mount Olive at 7 p.m. Now, I'm not going to do anything revolutionary here. I think that the top half of this conference is pretty definitively stronger than the bottom half of this conference. The one to watch out for is Barton and Emmanuel here because of this. Obviously, they're the 4 and 5 seeds. They're the two closest. Emmanuel just played Wingate super duper close, so I would not be super surprised if Emmanuel was able to pull out that win. However, I am still going to take the Barton squad in that game here. And for the rest, I'm going to have just the top seeds kind of leading the way there. Now, that takes us into Saturday here, where the winners of the 1-8 game and the 4-5 game will play at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. That is Saturday. And I'm assuming that means 1:30 over here for us. So according to my projections, that'll be Wingate and Barton in a rematch here to see if Barton was a one-trick upset against the likes of Wingate here, or if they can replicate that success. And on the other side of the bracket, it looks like I'm going to have a Ferrum Lise McRae rematch here. That one at 6 p.m. Now, these are a lot harder to predict. I think that this is where the tournament gets interesting, and the highest seed does not necessarily determine who is going to win. However, I'm going to take Wingate here in a revenge win over Barton here. And as far as the other side, this Ferrum Lise McRae game, especially after what I just watched, is definitely the most difficult game of the tournament to pick for me here. And I actually think whoever wins this game is going to go on and win the Conference Carolinas. Now, I know that my guy Joe is going to give me a hard time if that ends up backfiring on me. It's just a lot of games in a very short amount of time, which I don't think plays into Wingate's favor, honestly, as this is a squad that could really use time to rest, recover, heal, and notch some oxygen here and just rest for their players and athletes to get the most out of them. So I'm going to say that Ferrum here holds on in a very close win over Lise McRae and wins the first ever Conference Carolinas tournament. Now, tell me in the comments who you think is going to win, and let me know when I'm wrong, if I'm wrong. But, I wanted to put my best foot out there, but I obviously wish the best of luck to all of these squads. And really, more than anything, I just look forward to some great competition here for the first ever Conference Carolinas tournament on the collegiate level of flag football.
All right, thank you, Cody, for that. And then last but not least, we have a Women's College Flag Finals update. Remember, there will be the NAIA Invitational, which will take place at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. And then there will be a separate Women's College Flag Finals put on by RCX, who has put on the NAIA Finals of the previous years here. Now, it is confirmed the JUCOs will not be going there to participate in that tournament, and that is probably a direct rebuke of RCX, which is understandable. I don't blame them at all. So they will not be there. We have also heard that a program, an NAI program, who is looking to make the Invitational, if they do not make the Invitational, they will not be going for that Women's College Flag Finals. So we will see who decides to go and compete. We're obviously open to information on that so that we could paint a clearer picture on how that is going to look. But for now, no JUCOs. And then there are some teams that don't want to go there in general as well, which I totally understand. So we will see what happens, but things are definitely heating up here as we get to the end of the regular season for most teams. And that'll do it for the Playmaker's Corner podcast episode. Thank you so much for rocking with us. We got some great football this weekend here. I know Sun Conference is taking a break here. I want to say the KCAC has a couple more games to take care of, but we don't really anticipate any big surprises, so we'll see. And then Conference Carolinas will be in full swing, and that'll be super entertaining, so make sure you tune into those when you can. But either way, we will catch you on Tuesday, where we will recap all of those great games. And then obviously we have Thursday, where, we won't do rankings, right? But we'll do some recognitions, obviously. And then we are also going to continue to preview the postseason. But until then, we'll catch you later.